This is Jed Disler, and welcome to the Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. You can subscribe to the Piano Maven through my Substack page, and I have a link to do so in our episode description. So please consider a paid subscription to the Piano Maven, and you get all kinds of goodies like free downloads at the beginning of each month and links to Zoom meetings that we will schedule every other month where we can all meet and talk about our piano recording obsessions and anything we want to talk about. So do consider taking out a paid subscription to help keep this podcast in production throughout the rest of the year. When I was growing up, the American pianist Leonard Pennario seemed to get picked on a lot by record reviewers, probably because he made a lot of recordings of popular repertoire, and he was not averse to having his recordings, at least for the Capitol label or the EMI label, marketed in a kind of pops or semi-pops context. You know, you'd have titles like Concerto Under the Stars or Leonard Pennario Plays Your Favorites. So probably because of the way he sometimes was marketed, critics would just assume that he was a lightweight. But if you listen to his best recordings, you will realize immediately that Leonard Pennario had tremendous technique, and he was a colossal workman, and he could play with more color and flexibility of phrasing than he was often given credit for. I wrote the booklet notes for a box set that Sony BMG issued a few years ago containing Leonard Pennario's complete recordings for RCA Victor. His recordings for EMI, mainly for the Capitol label in the 1950s and 60s, and then his EMI recordings in the 70s and 80s, are all over the place, discographically speaking. They've never been completely and systematically reissued, although there was a box set that MSR brought out quite a few years ago, which were mostly mono solo recordings. But there were a lot of concerto recordings and a lot of things that still haven't been digitized. So, as I said, the EMI, Capitol, Angel, all those labels that are now controlled by Warner Classical, is these releases are all over the place. In the mid-1990s, though, EMI resurrected its budget Seraphim label, and on this label they reissued a whole bunch of Leonard Pennario discs, some of his concerto recordings for Capitol, as well as some solo material. And I generally found these in charity shops or secondhand record stores, usually selling for next to nothing, like 99 cents or $1.99. And I'm looking right now at this disc in my collection. I did pay 99 cents for it. And this is a disc that brought the Grieg Concerto, the Liszt Concerto No. 1, and the Chopin Concerto No. 2 all together. The Grieg and the Liszt are with Erich Leinsdorf conducting the Los Angeles Philharmonic. The Grieg is a really strong and sensitively inflected and I think well-characterized interpretation that treats the music seriously but never reverentially. The Liszt Piano Concerto No. 1 is a tad heavy in the orchestral department, and Pennario treats the piano part really in the grand manner, but very tastefully. I prefer tighter and more vividly detailed recordings from the same era. I'm thinking about, of course, the Sviatoslav Richter recording and the Byron Janis recording. And also, there are the remakes that Pennario did with Renee Leibowitz for RCA, which I prefer. But it's still good to have this recording. It's not that bad a performance. But the Chopin F minor concerto is very interesting. It has Vladimir Golshman conducting the Concert Arts Symphony Orchestra. I have a feeling this was a Los Angeles-based pickup ensemble. And The opening ritornello is unusually forthright and driving and totally unsentimental, and with really no lyricism about it. It was kind of a striking performance. When I heard it for the first time, I thought, wait, where is the singing? Where is the breadth? But, it is what it is. But Goldschmann takes a lot of care over the accompaniment, more than many conductors. And I think that this kind of forthrightness also informs Pennario's playing in the first movement. But the slow movement is quite expansive and poetic, and Pennario's strong melodic projection really helps sustain this pace. The rondo has great force and forward momentum, and although Pennario's right-hand filigree and decorative passages are as clean and as well projected as anyone else, his attention to bass lines and sometimes surprising accents hold a lot of interest. But there also are moments of really haunting delicacy on the pianist's part. The sonics in the Chopin are a little too reverberant and swimmy for my taste, but you can tell that Goldschmann is doing much more than beating time. As for Erich Leinsdorf, I think he accompanies with more commitment in the Grieg Concerto than in the Liszt. Now, these may not be one's absolute favorite tip-top recordings of the Grieg, the Liszt No. 1, and Chopin No. 2 concertos, but these performances certainly prove that Leonard Pennario was a finished virtuoso and a great workman who really had something to say in this repertoire. So the bottom line is, if you can find this disc for 99 cents or $1.99, or if you want to pay a little more for it, I wouldn't pay tons of money for it, but if you find it at a modest cost, go for it, because you won't go wrong. This is Jed Disler, and you've been listening to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings, and I hope we will be together for the next episode. Thank you so much for listening, and have a good day.